Hi, welcome to It's All in Your Head podcast. This is episode 11. And today we're going to be talking about seasonal depression and kind of the state of the world and how that's relating to the season. Tara, how are you today?
I'm fine. How are you?
I'm good. So, as we're talking about this, what kind of thoughts are coming to mind for you?
I think that we started this year going like, oh, it's 2020 and it was supposed to be the year of vision and the year of all these things. Like people were coming up with all these fun kind of concepts to celebrate 2020. And then it ended with one of my clients who's a millennial saying, now we say, wow, if you really mess something up, you 2020 that. And so it's just like to see the total change from what we expected at the beginning of this year to where we are now, getting ready to go out of this year.
Yeah, for sure. I gave a webinar recently to a group of nurses, and we were talking about trauma in a sense that there are things that happen to us as a society that are reminders of other things. And so when things happen, it can remind us of other things. And so for me, there's a little bit of a reminder of 9/11 back in 2001. And there was a reminder, and it can be kind of a traumatic reminder of that year. And a lot of the same things were happening, especially since I was working in the airline industry. And so
Mm-hmm.
there were layoffs and different things. For me, what happened was that although it was very tragic for me, I ended up laid off from my job. I actually was able to go back to school and get my master's degree and change into a career that's become rewarding and fulfilling. So for the last 19 years, I've done something different that's been rewarding and fulfilling. And I've been able to switch gears, and it was a kind of a rebirth for me. I'm hoping that that will happen for me with 2020 and for many other people too, as it becomes kind of a rebirth for us as we have to switch gears. But there's definitely a reminder of how things were really, really good for me and my family and my children. I was making more money than I'd ever made at the time. I was finally able to support myself and my children as a single mom for the first time. Um, we had the opportunity to travel. We had flight benefits. We traveled the world quite a bit, my children and I. And it was really quite a wonderful time. I remember having this feeling like I was on top of the world. And then 9/11 happens, and it's like it's this thing you just can't ever expect.
Mm-hmm.
And I know I had that same kind of feeling at the beginning of this year, that I felt on top of the world. Things were going really well. And then this thing hits. What about for you?
And I think the same thing, but what it's allowed me to do, it's funny because during that time, um, I was actually contemplating or either going through a divorce during that time. And I remember I was working in a program that did vocational rehab for teenagers. And we used to allow them in the morning to watch the news. And I remember sitting there and watching this thing unfold, and it was like surreal. And then I felt like some of those things have happened, and it was a pivotal moment. It was a pivotal year for me also, but in a much different way. And then we have excuse me, we have this whole 2020 thing, and it has afforded me more time to really think about things. And it's like I take all the time that I was using to drive. I'm like, I got to do something productive. I'm not a person who likes to sit still, period. So working at home has been good, but it's also not been the best for me. I need to be able to get out, move around, have, contact with people, but that hasn't happened. And so I was adding up the amount of time I drive in a week. And I'm like, this I could actually be doing a whole nother thing and have the time that I need to do the things that I need to do. So it's also that same kind of pivotal thing. I've been busier than I ever thought that I would be, whether it's, especially in our practice, that we have absolutely no space. I wish we did, but we don't, which is part of why we said we would do this podcast. Hopefully it could help people because we can't get to everyone who would like to have contact with. And so I've been really encouraging people also find out what you can go back and reclaim and do it. You've got time, especially people who are out of work or who also like us are spending a lot of time working from home. I know you spend a lot of time working from the office, but
Yeah.
so it's just been one of the you can look back on this year and decide to make it be something different than what it's kind of charted to be for yourself. And we still have time. It's only December 12th. So you can still do some things that will help you feel more productive and ready to go into the new year.
Yeah, for sure. And then we started talking about how a lot of people go through depression at this season, and then we're in this situation that's been somewhat depressing. Now, some of the reasons why it's, ultimately depressing now, are obviously reasons that we're shut in. We can't contact other people. We can't even sometimes get with our families. So there's even more depressing. And some of the situations that many people are in are not good. Like you said, that back when 9/11/2001 happened, you were contemplating divorce. Now, there were people at the beginning of 2020 who were also contemplating divorce, and then were not able to leave the situation that they were in. And so there's things that have happened now. Some of these were clients of mine who have actually worked on their marriages and have been able to come out the other end deciding to stay together. I've had two clients that have decided to stay together who were actually contemplating divorce at the beginning of 2020. And then they were shut in together, had no choice but to try and learn to get along, and continued some counseling, got some counseling, and actually did some hard work. And now they're deciding to stay together. And I'm really proud of them. There are others who should have been divorced and are getting divorced, and are able to carry that out. And, it's just been a really tough situation because trying to get divorced in the middle of a pandemic is almost impossible.
Mhm.
And the court systems are really backed up. In fact, you told me recently, what's your experience been with that?
Finally, it's done, hopefully. So I think we talked about it on a previous podcast where I had gotten a summons for grand jury duty. And I think I made light of it, but I kind of knew I was going to be picked. And so sure enough, I was. And for 3 months, I have been a part of a grand jury in my county. And it's like, oh, I will say this, it's an experience. I've done my civic duty and I hope I never have to do it again. That's all I can say about it right now, because it's supposed to be secret and all of that. But I've done my civic duty and I hope I never have to do it again.
Maybe once in a lifetime is all you ever have to do it. That's what you're saying?
Well, that's what I hope happens. They can call me again by law after 6 months, but I'm hoping that my name gets skipped. That's what I'm hoping.
Oh my goodness.
It was very interesting. One day after all of my cases that I sat on kind of are out and resolved, I can talk more about it, but it was not an experience that was enjoyable for me. I'll just say that. Maybe some people liked it. I didn't. Not at all. So
But well, and back to what's going on with our clients, and both of us do have a wait list of clients. And I felt really bad recently because I had someone contact me who wanted to come in as a new client, and I have a wait list, but I really felt strongly that this client would fit well in my practice because of the types of situations this person had going on. And they had found me on one of my, I think it was Psychology Today. And when this person contacted me, they wanted me to have a phone consultation with them to determine if I was a good fit. Now, have you had time to do any of those? And as gently as I could, I had to just explain that I didn't have time for that, but that, please come in for the first session. This person could decide after the first session. We just don't have time for that. And this person was so offended that I got a really nasty text saying that,
Wow.
saying that they were no longer interested and that that was not professional and blah, blah. And I'm sorry. This is the times that we're in. And I mean, that may sound heartless, but truthfully, Tara, I know that you and I, self-care has really been a thing. We've had to be, our boundaries around that have had to be so solid because I know for me, especially because in the beginning of the pandemic, I tried to help as many people as possible, and I overdid it, and I ended up in a really anxious place and having some problems, and had to back off quite a bit, and I've had to be really, really solid with my boundaries around my self-care. And and man, I'm getting emotional about this as I'm talking about it, just realizing at that time, I really thought that this was going to be temporary. And this was way
Right.
back in March, April, May.
Mhm.
And by August, I was in an anxious mess. And it was hard. It was really hard. And the hard thing is that I couldn't stop working because at that point, my husband, who works for Delta, was not working. And so I felt a little bit like the athlete. They were just taping up and throwing back on the field and saying, do your best, you know?
Right.
And it
Right.
really did feel like that. And I was doing my best to keep my boundaries and improve my self-care and get through some of the anxiety I was experiencing and try to find my balance and get my balance back because I really thought that this thing was going to be much more temporary than it was.
Mhm.
And I can handle anything temporarily, but when it becomes long term, and there are honest changes in the brain that kind of take place that when we're isolated in the beginning of an isolation, there's areas of the brain that actually get more active. It's almost like the brain's trying to, um, trying not to drown, so to speak. The brain's trying to preserve itself.
Mhm.
But over time, those same areas of the brain become less and less and less and less active. And I think we kind of saw that when we very first had the pandemic first started, we would go to Home Depot and it was just like this flurry of activity.
Yep.
everybody's got everybody's got a project, right? And their houses, they were redoing houses and they had all these DIY projects going on. And
Yep.
but once you got everything around the house fixed and there was absolutely nothing else left to fix, the days go by and it just gets harder and harder to get out of bed and take a bath, you know,
Right. Right.
which is um which is why I was trying to go into the office every single day. And it went from less and less people in the office to at one point they didn't even have a receptionist in there. So the doors were not even they remained locked all day long.
Mhm.
But I was still seeing people virtually, but I was doing it in my office. But just that routine of that I continued to get up every day and go into the office and see people, even though I was seeing them all virtually. And then it kind of started waking back up to where they had the receptionist come back just part of the day. Um, and then the receptionist is there every day still, and there's a few people back working in their offices. But unfortunately, many people, because where our office is, where Tara and I share an office, is many people there are business owners, private business owners, and there's many of them have gone out of business, and so there's about half of the
Wow.
office is empty.
I didn't
And
even know
so
that.
Yeah, so
I did
about half
not
those
know that.
offices are now empty. So several of the people who were friends of mine that I've become friends with are now gone, and
Mhm.
that's been kind of sad to see. It's still kind of quiet around there. The cafeteria opened back up about a month or so ago, and we're all trying to be supportive.
Right,
Everybody's
okay.
eating at the cafeteria in the building. As the family there, fantastic family, great cooks.
And
So,
it's safer
well,
in compare, I mean, just to limit your contact.
thank you for joining It's All in Your Head podcast. I just want to remind you to subscribe, like, share, and comment below. Thank you.
I hear what you're saying about all of that, because I I said this to many people in the very beginning. The pandemic at the very beginning was anyone who had depression, anxiety, or any issue like that that makes you kind of want to self-isolate were in heaven for about 6 weeks. After that 6 weeks, they were over it. And so that is kind of what all of us have been experiencing. And the same for me. It was like, yes, I'm working from home. When I tell you, I felt like I was on an extended vacation. That's what it was like at first. And then I was like, okay, enough is enough is enough. I'm ready for something different,
Mm-hmm.
whatever that difference is going to look like, because it's definitely going to look different than what it looked like before, but I'm ready for something different. And
So
then
there's a Portuguese word that Serge told me that I think is really great. Is that syndrome that happens where you start doing less and less and not wanting to get up, and you stop, like for a man, it's where you stop shaving, every day and things like that. You kind of, it's called vagabondice in Portuguese, and it means that where you look more and more like a vagabond. So vagabondice.
uh, I told jokes. I'm like, boy, I don't have to do laundry because I'm wearing the same pair of pants every day.
Right. Like that.
Because it's like, what do we do? To do
Yeah.
what? So,
Yeah.
but I know we were talking a little bit about how we know that for some people, the seasons, or especially this holiday season time, can be very difficult. And some people, their mood just changes. It changes with the seasons. And there used to be a disorder. You can help me out if you're still in DSM, but seasonal affective disorder,
Affective
which
disorder. Mhm.
which is just dealing with the fact that when the seasons change, there are some people whose moods fluctuate by that also. And for people who deal with that, or sometimes people who have experienced extreme loss, have a lot more of a difficult time around the holiday season. And most of the major religions have holidays during the winter months. So it's not just Christians also. And because of that, they experience, that melancholy feeling comes anyway, but that now it might be able to be tipping over more because they've just had more to deal with in this year. But just being aware of that. And also, we've been talking about self-care because that's something that me and you both really believe in, but just encouraging other people to engage in self-care, come up with self-care practices. You can YouTube anything. So find ways to take care of yourself during this time, especially if you're struggling, and find somebody who you can kind of not, because sometimes we don't even know that we're struggling. We'll just wake up and we're in it, if that makes sense. So I don't know. What would you say, Michelle?
Yeah, well, I think that's what happened to me in August is I didn't even know that I was struggling. I just kind of woke up and I was just going through a period of time where I started, the thoughts that were coming out of my head just weren't making sense anymore, you know. And that's when my husband said, I don't think you're okay. And it has to be sometimes somebody outside of you saying, I don't think you're okay.
Mhm.
And people we trust,
Right.
saying, I think you need some help. And so sometimes we have to listen to those people around us, saying that. And it oftentimes starts with a thought we have in our mind. And we talked a little bit about this, Tara, about how when we're not interacting with other people, we get way too much into our thoughts. And
Mm-hmm.
our thoughts are not always true. In fact, very often they're not. Very often the thoughts that we have are about the past, which is a lot of shame, or they're about
Mm-hmm.
the future, which includes a lot of fear about
Mm-hmm.
the future.
Mm-hmm.
And
And I
so,
notice for me, I can tell when I'm getting a little bit, no, a lot of bit stressed and where my anxiety is really going up because my husband calls it like breadcrumbs. He said, I can tell every place you've been because every room that I go in the house, I leave something. And he's just like, like this is not, which is it's definitely the gauge that I get. And I can it's like I can recognize it, but I can't stop the spin. And
mhm,
so sometimes I have to go ahead and let you know how you have a spinning top and it spins until it stops.
mhm,
And once I get a stop, I can then start to kind of clear my mind so that I can go back and kind of start to clear up these things where I know it's gotten kind of out of control. And so it's just being able to know also when you deal with anxiety, you got to be able to recognize what triggers you. If
mhm,
you cannot recognize what triggers you, there's no way to know how to deal with it. And I always say it's only two things you can do with the trigger. You can either manage it if you have to, or you can avoid it. But you don't know which technique to employ if you don't know what's triggering you.
mhm.
So if my husband is a trigger for me, well, that's a trigger I gotta manage because I can't avoid it, right?
Right.
So those are the things that we have to think about. And it was something because I watched our last episode with the two young ladies that we interviewed that were former clients of ours. And it was just interesting that it was like they were emphasizing and overemphasizing the need to get help when you need it, the need to talk to
Mhm,
someone. Don't stay by yourself. And I'm like, that is the best advice. I would reiterate that also over and over and over again. Get help, talk to somebody, knock it off of somebody. Don't just stay suffering because you don't really have to do that. You can actually find somebody who can assist you with whatever you're dealing with.
mhm. Well, for me, you talked about yours being breadcrumbs. For me, it's light switches. And what I mean by that is when my mood starts to shift, I start turning on lights everywhere and leaving them on. And I think it's because the lighter it is, that I'm somehow thinking that'll help. If I just keep the light everywhere, and I'll be leaving lights on everywhere. And that's where my husband starts saying, "Are you okay?" Because there's lights on all over the house. And you're right. So I have a therapist that I go to when I'm not doing okay, and I'll start seeing my therapist again. But I also know that for me, if I get a real deep tissue massage, it can, for some reason, seems to massage all of the stress and everything right out of my body. And if I can get a really good deep tissue massage, it just is amazing what kind of reset that will do for me. And so I was walking down the mall. I mean, I knew I needed to get this done recently again. And because I had it back in August and I needed to do it again. And I was home for Thanksgiving. And one of my traditions with my granddaughter is that we always go shopping on Black Friday. And we
Okay.
decided that we would go shopping, even though they had the mall set up where there was only a few people could go into the store at a time. Excuse me. Only a few people could go into the store at a time. Of course, everybody had masks on. And so there were these long lines to wait, even just to get into the store. And she wanted to go. And so we went ahead and we went. And she was waiting in a line for this store. And I took off in another direction. And this this guy was at a kiosk in the middle of the mall where they were doing these just massages, just kind of like where you sit in a chair leaning forward and they do these little shoulder massages. And he grabs my arm and he says, free massage, free massage. And he just grabs my arm and pulls me over there. And as he's giving me this free massage, they put underneath your face there, they put this little laminated thing that says that the prices for a full massage, and it was pretty cheap. It was like $1 a minute. So like for
Oh,
an
okay.
hour massage, only $60, That's pretty good. So I went back the next day and had a 1 hour. It wasn't a massage. It was actually, what did they call it? It was a acupressure. They called it an acupressure massage. So something different. And man, it was like much more intense. Like this guy had his elbows in my back, elbows in my back and doing all this stuff. And it was pretty intense. But I'll tell you what, when I came out of there, it wasn't relaxing. It was not a relaxing massage. It was more of a really aggressive massage. But when I came out of there, I felt really good. So it was acupressure and then reflexology is what they called it. And I felt really good afterwards. And I don't think I realized how much I needed it until it was all over with. And I just felt really good. So that was one of my cures that I'm going to use in the future, one of my self cares from here on out. What do
And
you
I
do?
think, yeah, I think about it because I remember, I love to cook and I love to bake. And I hadn't been doing that much of that, but at Thanksgiving, I had to cook. It was time for me to cook. But I just remember feeling so rejuvenated when I was in the kitchen and I was cooking and I was getting everything prepared. And I'm like, I really missed doing this. I need to get back to making sure that I'm doing this and that I'm doing it, however often that I can do it, because it was definitely, I could tell the difference. I really could. I felt so much better after and usually I'm tired but I felt rejuvenated. I was happy. And I was like, oh, I missed this. I have to get back to doing this. And which is also one of the symptoms that we look for when, we know that anxiety is out of control or that depression is out of control, is you don't find enjoyment in things you used to enjoy. Right. And if you find yourself feeling that way or kind of losing your get up and go, that could be a sign. So it's just looking for these different signs and knowing when, because we just don't know. Like you said, that feeling of, I think for me, to a feeling of dread, just like, oh, what's today gonna bring, And just when I see that, just taking note of that, okay, here I am. I'm getting to a place that I need to really kind of rewind myself or unwind myself. And I like to go places. And so not being able to do that has been, I think the most difficult thing to deal with this year is not being able to go.
Right. I have to agree with you because I'm a goer too, and we don't stay home much. And I think particularly hard for my husband because he's been, furloughed from Delta for months now. And it's been particularly hard for him. And we had a conversation the other day because, I'll come home from work and I will have seen, 6, 7, sometimes 8 clients in a day, which is too many. And my therapist told me to cut back, and that's what I've had to cut back and limit myself to 6 clients a day. And but I was seeing at some points, 7 or 8 clients a day, and I come home and I'm exhausted and I really don't want to talk. But my husband, who's been home alone all day long, wants to talk. And all I want to do is be left alone. And we were really struggling with the fact that I just wanted to be left alone. So I'm kind of retreating into myself, and he feels like he's not listened to because I'm really not listening to him. I'm spaced out somewhere else, And it was creating some conflict between us. So we went for a walk in the park, and we were walking. We have a nice walking trail in the park near us, and we were walking along the trail in this park, trying to talk our way through this and coming to this conclusion, just that I am exhausted when I get home, but he's been home alone all day and he wants some attention and I don't have any more to give. And so me needing to cut back because the two extra clients are not worth my husband not having any energy left over for my husband when I get home. And it's just not worth that, and having to really find those balances so that I have the energy that for everybody and energy for myself, in the end.
Thank you for joining us for It's All in Your Head podcast. Remember to subscribe, like, share, and please comment. Whatever mental health questions you have, we will be happy to answer them in future podcasts. So I kind of want to start to talk a little bit about, again, we're talking about seasonal affective disorder. We're talking about just how 2020 has been as a whole. And I want to talk about some current events also, because for those who don't know, me and Michelle are here in Georgia. And being in Georgia, we know that there's a lot going on with the political process. We've got some of the highest coronavirus cases. So a lot of what's going on nationally and globally, we also find like right here local with us. And so I want to talk about a couple of those current events. The first thing I want to talk about is this continued election stuff. I don't know what to call it because I know that it's stressful, but it's also an opportunity to show how the people have really shined in our state. So what comes to your mind when you first think about what's going on with the election, Michelle?
Well, I think, what's going on with the election, I think that, first of all, I think what brings to mind is there's I don't know what to call it. It's a documentary actually, and it's on YouTube. And I mean, sorry, not YouTube. It's on Netflix. And it's called The Social Dilemma. Now, this documentary is put together by people who used to be in positions of leadership in Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and they've all come together and made this documentary. And they've talked about how what they've done is they were challenged to put together a way to make these platforms more user-friendly. And the way that they did this was they needed to make it more profitable, so that they can make more money for advertisers and things. And so the way to make it more profitable and more user-friendly was to keep people on the internet longer. And the way that they did that was they made sure that they made people stay on the internet longer and longer by making sure that they put things in front of them that they were interested in, and they kept them more and more interested. And they got so good at it that they could keep people on the internet, started out 2 hours a day up to 7 to 8 hours a day. And they got so good at this algorithms that they could entice people onto the internet by showing them more and more interesting things, cat videos, whatever it was, right? If they were interested in that. And unfortunately, what they feel like they did was they created a situation where people only saw things on the internet that they were interested in initially, and created a single-mindedness in people, which showed up politically, in a sense that if people had a single-mindedness politically, they remained single-minded politically. And it created a division politically, where one person would not listen to another point of view of another. And they have seen this happen in so many different areas, but it showed up most markedly politically, where it used to be that we could have a political discussion with anybody and people would get maybe heated, but it was always kind of a laughing kind of heatedness, like, oh, I can't believe you believe that, or whatever. And we could have discussions like that even among family members, where it didn't get violent or nasty. It was just, oh, you're silly for believing the way you do, right? But But it's not that way anymore. The political climate is extremely heated, and these people on this social dilemma documentary say that they created that inadvertently as they were trying to get people to stay on the internet longer and longer so they would buy more and more products, right?
Mhm.
And they're saying that somehow they're going to fix this. They're going to fix this. They broke it, now they're going to fix it. And
Okay.
that's what this is about. But one of the things that I guess sticks out for me is just how where I don't mind listening to all kinds of political points of view, but I don't feel like people are reciprocating that as I'm trying to voice mine. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
What are your thoughts about it?
I think that that it's a lot where was harder for me because my kids are all millennials, pretty much. And what was hard is that having these political conversations, they seem to be a little less interested in it than what
Mhm.
I would like. So
Uh-huh.
it's like, okay, I wanted them to be fired up, let's do this. And I just wasn't getting that response. So I was doing things like sending them little messages and videos and showing them this and showing them that. And for the most part, they were just non-responsive where that was concerned. But we see what's happening in the political climate. And we I think that what now most people are searching for, which I remember you said it before, and I was watching one of our old podcasts, and it still cracks me up. But you said between you and I, and it's true, we've seen a lot of elections, and some of them we've won, and some of them we've lost. And it's just hoping that we're getting back to that a level of civility is what
Mhm.
I'm hoping for. If we can get back to a level of civility where we're back to, I don't mind the passion. I just I don't want, for lack of a better word, the craziness after it. Like people have done some crazy things
Mhm.
during this time, and that's what I don't want. But if we can get back to a level of civility, keep the passion, keep the social movements going forward, there's some wonderful things that have come out of this unrest. Most companies they're more, I want to say, socially aware than they've ever been.
Mhm.
So people making statements, I forget some of them that I've seen, but things like, I can't remember if it was Facebook, Google, or whatever, but just the flat declaration, like, somebody declares Black Lives Matter. Those kinds of things have been awesome,
Mhm.
so we're seeing that in corporate America. There have been more diversity and inclusion departments created for so many different companies than we've ever seen in history. So, well, in our modern day history, I'll say. So just learning to kind of take this good that's coming out of it and not change it to something that is negative is going to be, I think, the task that we're faced with. We want to keep kind of a positive spin. And I think in order to get that, all of us have to take a little bit of individual responsibility. Because what we've done is taken our lead from leaders,
Mhm.
and we've not been in a climate recently where we've been able to do that. So now we've got to look at ourselves and say, where am I socially? Where am I politically? Where am I in the responsibility of this process? And go forward with that in a way that is responsible and respectful and truly like indicating who we are as individuals who come together in this collective. That's what I'm hoping for. And I think that that would be a great thing going forward. What do you think?
I think so too. One thing that I want to caution people about is looking to a president to be your moral leader. I mean, it would be
We
nice,
talked about that. Yeah.
but
Yep.
our
Go
church
ahead.
leaders, yeah, our church leaders are our moral leaders. And we need to really look there, or to your community leaders or people that you feel um, have a moral value system that you believe in. You know, be sure you're looking in the right places for that.
Right. And saying that doesn't mean that these same people, because I know that if people comment, we'll get comments about, you know, sometimes these pastors and these people, they're not all that. Okay, we understand, but we know that there should be, just because there should be a moral code there and there is a standard, does not mean that everybody's going to live up to it.
Right.
People are people.
Mm-hmm.
And I know people say a lot of times there's been one person who walked on water in history. Actually, there were two, but you know, going by scripture, but still, based on that whole thing, no one should be expected to be perfect. But excuse me, there's some people who are more equipped to handle that area than other people. And I think that that's the point that you're making. We should shift our focus to people who are more equipped to handle the morality than the political leaders. Thank you for joining us for It's All in Your Head podcast. This has been episode 11. And remember,
Mental health matters.
And if you don't deal with your stuff, it's going to deal with you. Bye-bye.
Bye.